Melissa O'Neill, and I'm really excited to share some information with you today about infant sleep, as it is my passion. So, my business is Raising Bundle, and I work virtually with families as well as online. And I am a mom to an amazing 11-year-old son. I've worked as a postpartum doula for over 5 years, supporting families during those first few years following birth. My own motherhood experiences, along with my experience as a postpartum doula, is what brought about my passion for infant sleep and has guided my practice. So, gentle and holistic sleep is my passion, and I bring my knowledge as a certified sleep consultant, a breastfeeding specialist, and along with my occupational therapy skills, postpartum mental health expertise, and so much more. So today I would want to talk about what is normal infant sleep, routines and associations, sleep environments, what common sleep interrupters are, self-settling versus self-soothing, emotional regulation, and sleep without formal sleep training. So every family and every baby is different, along with our countries and our cultures. All of us are unique, and so is our sleep. So only about 20% of babies at 6 months of age are sleeping through the night. So the thing is, our little ones need dependence before they can be independent. The first 3 months after birth can be considered the fourth trimester. So during this time, your baby will many times want to be held close. They spend 9 months snuggled inside of you, so it takes time before they're ready to not be close. So when they are close to you, they can hear you and feel you, and that's what helps them feel safe. So I always say, even when my son was little, it would be really nice if our babies came with a manual so we would know what to do. And with sleep being different for every baby and every person, it's really important to find their specific sleepy cues and their patterns that they might show you leading up to becoming tired, or even give you cues as what good awake windows are for them. So I'm sure you've noticed that the amount of sleep needed for our little ones varies by multiple hours. So if you read things, they'll say your infant needs 14 to 16 hours of sleep, or 14, like it's a massive amount of difference in the hours. So it's hard to say this is the specific schedule that you should follow. So because just like adults, we all need different amounts of sleep, so do our kids. So we can't compare one baby to another. And I think this is really challenging these days, especially with social media. I feel like mom guilt and questioning if we're doing what's best for our baby is even higher because of social media, and because families are also more spread out. So we don't really have those villages of support like we used to in many situations. So some common tired cues to look for would be if your baby starts to slow down, if their eyes get glossy or red, or their movements start to get jerky, or their energy is lower, they become more needy, or maybe some of them will even pull at their ears, or just unique cues that your own baby might have. Toddlers, they can wind up leading us to think they aren't tired. And I was definitely guilty of that when my son was little. I would think, oh, he's not tired. He still has so much energy, when actually he was exhausted. So, because we're hitting on sleep, I find it really important to cover bed sharing versus room sharing, because it's a huge topic. So did you know that actually 40 to 60% of mamas end up bed sharing, which is keeping your little one in bed with you at some point? I know I did this out of pure exhaustion, though it isn't recommended. I believe it's really important to prepare your environment to safely bed share, just in case you end up in that 40 to 60% like me. So I spent many nights falling asleep in the chair while nursing my son, and then I'd wake up hours later and I couldn't even move my neck. It hurt so bad. And I look back and I'm thankful to this day that my son never ended up in a compromised position. So for me, bed sharing ended up being the safest option for me in the way that I survived. Even though it's not recommended, I wish I was educated on how to do it in the best way possible, because it's what I ended up doing. So what is highly recommended, though, is room sharing, and that's keeping your baby in the same room with you on their own sleep space. So this is wonderful. So you can keep them close and you can touch them and comfort them if you need to. They can smell you, they can hear you. And then it allows you to not have to get up and move around as much during the night and hopefully get a little bit more rest. So just when you think you start to have things figured out, the sleep schedule changes again. Like a lot of times they can change about every 3 weeks. So you're like, yes, we have this good routine going, and then everything has to change, and that can feel overwhelming. So sleep patterns emerge and then they're growing, and then you have a new sleep pattern emerges. So as you find those perfect schedules and realize you have to make a change again, it's important to follow their cues. So really reading your baby's cues all along really helps guide you to know when they need sleep, when they're tired, and how to set those routines around sleep during the day. Around 9 months of age is when you can really start to set some gentle boundaries around sleep, because before that, most babies have trouble falling asleep without parent support. If you're feeling stressed about sleep, your baby's going to feel that stress, and this will cause them to fight sleep. So, in just a bit, we'll discuss emotional regulation. If something in your bedtime routine or about sleep is causing you stress, it can be really important to work through those and make changes. So, if your baby doesn't feel that you're okay, then they don't feel okay. One huge suggestion that I have related to sleep and stress is if it's taking longer than 30 minutes, or whatever, maybe for you it's 20 minutes to get your baby to fall asleep, it might be good to step away and go do something different with them and then come back and try again later. And so you guys can relieve your stress and go back into it with a better mindset. Um, Other difficulties falling asleep may be related to their temperament. So, temperament is based off of personality, and this can impact the way we react to certain things. So, just like you and I might find loud noises overwhelming or certain forms of touch overwhelming, our little ones do as well. So light is a really great way to support sleep. The best form of light is going to be sunshine, like the natural light outside. Playing outside is really helpful, and especially helpful to get your infants outside as well. The early morning sun and even afternoon and early evening sun can help regulate their circadian rhythm. So it can take about 2 or 3 weeks to adjust circadian rhythm. And so when your little one is first born, really using that light to benefit you is helpful. It can promote with your infants, it can promote more awake time and support setting that circadian rhythm for you so they're not awake a lot of the night. So if you get outside, if you can't get outside, then letting light shine in from your windows is another great option. Or lastly, turning on the lights in the house so it can cue their brain that it's daytime. Feeding at night is a topic I hear about often. So many people I hear telling people that once your baby reaches a certain weight, 12 pounds or whatever that magic weight is, they don't need to feed at night anymore. And this isn't true. Our little ones are still working on regulating their temperature, their heart rate, they're growing, and so much more. So feeding is supporting their growth and also giving them that time to be close to their caregiver and regulate all of the things that their body's learning to manage. So feeding at night is even important up to like 9 months of age. And once you get to that 9 months of age, you can definitely start to set some gentle boundaries around sleep. And maybe if your little one is still waking often, then there's things you could look into to see how their sleep is going. So waking every 2 hours is really typical when they're little. And then as they get older, it's not too much to ask for that 4 to 5 hour stretch, as long as there's not anything interfering with their sleep, like breathing, reflux, or anything else. So there's no one size fits plan to infant sleep, which it would be nice if there was, but that leads us to really having to pay attention to our individual baby and our specific family needs. Having nightly routines leading up to bedtime will help signal to your little one that bedtime is coming soon, and it helps them to wind down. So sleep associations are things that they need in order to fall asleep. The more you have, the better. So you're not always stuck with doing the same exact thing if something isn't working for you. So having lots of routines and other things they associate with sleep is wonderful, like rocking, bath time, singing, white noise, lovey, pacifier, really anything that works for you. So typically, the more consistent your routine is, the less stress there is related to bedtime, which for your baby, which means there would also typically be less stress for you. That being said, there's no perfect schedule for babies to follow, and there's no perfect routines. You have to find what works best for your family. So, nursing or feeding to sleep is okay as a sleep association. A lot of people are curious, like, I shouldn't feed my baby to sleep, but there are actually, especially with breastfeeding, there's sleep inducing hormones that are produced when they're nursing, which can help promote them falling asleep. Um, it's okay if you decide that you're no longer enjoying something in your routine with your child and make some changes. Like if you're not enjoying nursing to sleep anymore, that's okay to make that change. Or if you are having to walk or bounce your baby and they're getting too big or it's hurting your back or whatever, it's okay to make that change. So I found that most babies really love motion. They spend months growing in motion, so movement can help them fall asleep. If you're battling naps during the day or even getting to bed, the motion helps. So during the day, baby wearing can be a really great option to support a nap. Naps don't really seem to fall into place until the baby is about 4 to 6 months of age. And so at that point, it can be helpful just to get a nap in whatever way you can. If that means putting them in a swing during the day so they can have motion or baby wearing, just do whatever you can to get some, so they can get some sleep and you can stay sane and they won't get overtired. So, really, for this, the more associations you have with sleep, the better. All right, so first, you must do what works best for your family when it comes to sleep environment. There are a lot of common recommendations, but that doesn't always mean it's the best fit. You want a sleep environment that's conducive to sleep. It's a sort of spa-like environment that induces relaxation. Reading what your baby enjoys is important, even what they if what you enjoy if they're sharing a room with you is really important as well. So when I recommend things for sleep environment, these are things that I would like the potential options that I would recommend. But remember, it has to be what works best for your family. So sound machine is something I typically recommend because it blocks out noises that can startle your baby. That being said, I did have a family that I worked with that the father was unable to sleep with the sound machine. So it wasn't a good fit for their family. So they had to choose not to do that in their family, which is fine. Blackout curtains are a wonderful option because they can help support the release of melatonin, which then supports your little one's internal biological clock through the use of that light and dark. Eliminating any light creeping in through the blackout curtains and using the sound machine to block out external noise can support them to sleep once their sleep pressure starts to wear off around 4 a.m. And another great thing to do is to begin dimming the lights about 1 to 2 hours before bed, because this will signal to their brain that it's nearing time for sleep. The next thing that I really like to hit on is temperature. So babies typically sleep best in cooler environments. So keeping the room between 64 to 72 can be helpful. In my personal experience as a postpartum doula, I found that 67 to 68 seems to be great. But honestly, if you don't keep your house at this temperature, that's perfectly fine. You can just dress your baby accordingly with layers. So a great way to check and see how warm they are is by touching the back of their neck to see if it feels really hot or sweaty. Many times I've found that babies sleep better when their cheeks are cooler, and even sometimes their hands, if their hands are a little cooler. Just like we all enjoy different temperatures for sleep, so do our children. When my son was little, I always thought, because he wasn't the best sleeper and I didn't really know what to do, I always thought he wasn't sleeping well because he was cold. And so I was putting socks and like baby legs and uh, a fleece pajamas on and all these layers and then wrapping him up. And I thought he was so cold. And then as he got older, I realized that he was actually hot. He wasn't sleeping well because he was hot. He ended up being, and still to this day at 11, he's one of those kids that just wants to sleep in his underwear with hardly anything covering him because he just sleeps hotter and he likes the cooler environment. So I wish I would have known more about that when he was little, so he probably would have slept better for me. Um, Also, I want to hit on sleep attire. Many times, fleece isn't really a good option for babies to sleep in because they get too hot, because it doesn't breathe well, so it can lead them to sweat. And then if you're sweaty and then you get cooler, and it's just kind of ends up being not a really good option. So my suggestion is sticking with things like cotton or bamboo, and also using sleep sacks and swaddles that are the same type of material like cotton or bamboo. During the night, my last suggestion for sleep environment is when you're caring for your little one during the night is keep the room as the lights as dim as possible so that the lights don't signal to their brain that it's time to wake up, and even potentially use a red light at nighttime. So common sleep interrupters is there's sleep interrupters is something we don't typically want. I know most of us enjoy our sleep, at least I do. So, teething and sickness can be hard, but those are things that you just kind of do what you can do just to survive. There's not a lot. I mean, obviously, you could give them Tylenol and such, but there's not a lot you can do to make changes during that time. Many people talk about sleep regression, but I actually like to label them progressions. So, yeah, sleep might get a little bit weird, but it's typically because your little one's progressing in their development. So, maybe it's mentally or through a growth spurt or a physical milestone, like they're starting to crawl or they're pulling up or walking or talking. So, your little one, they might wake in the middle of the night to practice these skills because our brains don't ever really turn off. Our brains don't stop when we go to sleep. So the best thing that you can do during these progressions is practice a ton during the day. It was about a year ago. I was working with a family, and it was so cute. This baby would wake up and he would practice his chatting around 3 a.m. and he would sometimes do it for 45 minutes to an hour. And it was cute to sit there and listen to his voice. And he would try all these like high and low and loud and like grumbly noises and like for a while. And it was really cute to listen to him. And I never had to pick him up and support him back to sleep. He would just chat and then eventually fall back to sleep on his own. But some babies might wake to practice in the middle of the night, and then they might need your support to go back to sleep. But some of the most common sleep progressions, which I wish I knew when these were when my son was little as well, will hit around 4 months and then 6 months. But the 4 to 6 months can kind of run together. And around that time is when they start to sleep more like an adult. So their bodies are going to start to go in and out of those sleep cycles. And then around 8 to 10 months, you have another progression, and then separation anxiety can peak for the first time around this time. And then 12 months is another one. And then around 18 months, separation anxiety peaks again, and your little one's going to start to develop more of a will. So at this time, it can be great to set some gentle boundaries around sleep. Then they're going to start to have those nap time battles and bedtime battles. So many times they'll pick the nap back up. So just sticking with a consistent routine to push for the nap and keeping that bedtime routine can be great ways to support those sleep progressions. Self-settling versus self-soothing. These are huge topics I hear about a lot. So our little ones naturally cry to communicate with us when they need something. So did you know that crying actually releases cortisol, which is the stress hormone? So it's okay if they cry a little bit. We just don't want them to continue crying and continue to release this stress hormone and leave them alone. So if you leave them unsupported to cry and supposedly self-soothe, this will send them into a fight or flight state, and it brings about really high levels of stress. So they don't stop crying because they learn to soothe themselves, but rather because you didn't come back, so they stop signaling for you. I got a lot of questions about the difference between the self-settling and self-soothing, so let's talk about those. So self-soothing is one thing that maybe you got from the last slide is I don't believe that our little ones are capable of doing it. Their brain isn't fully developed. Their hippocampus and their prefrontal cortex, they haven't formed enough for them to have that object permanence and know that you'll be back. Object permanence will happen from around 18 months. So that's when you can begin to set those some more gentle bedtime boundaries if you need to. Um, at this age, when the young age, when they don't have, object permanence and they don't know how to manage their emotions, they need us to support them and not allow their bodies to go into an extreme state of stress. So if we just stop and think for a minute, there's so much talk about how stress negatively impacts our bodies as adults. And so I like to reflect on how that if we leave a tiny baby to go in an extreme state of stress, how that would impact them, because they need us to regulate their emotions and feel safe and have that closeness and contact with parents and caregivers. Self-settling. So this is when a baby can go from an awake state and then fall asleep without support from anyone, without stress or tears. So sometimes they might lay there and like grumble or grunt, but they're not upset or crying or really frustrated. So many babies will self-settle, or you can begin to support them to do this when they get past that 4-month sleep progression. They might need additional support as they go through other sleep progressions or peaks in separation anxiety, though. A great way to start ensuring that you're is like to support them to self-settle is ensure that you're not putting them down while they're distressed, and to also help them to become familiar with their sleep environment. So daytime practice in their sleep environment, or just playing and enjoying their sleep space so it's a place that they love and a place that they're comfortable with. Emotional regulation. So I've stated that our little ones are unable to regulate their emotions, so they need us. And they get this through connection. You're building your baby's brain by holding them and kissing them and snuggling them and interacting with them. Their brain is only about 25% developed at birth, so they rely on us for a lot for regulating of breathing, temperature regulation, heart rate, and so much more. One thing I found really interesting in a course that I took recently is there's about 1 million neural connections made every second, which I think is just insane. So every interaction you have with your baby is making new connections. They're learning so much during those first few years of life. So since our little ones aren't able to regulate their emotions, they rely on us. They need to be close to us. So if you're feeling stressed, your baby's going to feel that. So it's important to really think about how you're feeling and take care of yourself. So our babies' brains, because they're not fully developed, then they can't turn off stress. Because the hippocampus and prefrontal cortex are still developing, like we spoke about in self-soothing, they need you to support them to regulate the stress. So leaving them to cry it out, it makes my heart break, and this sends them into an extreme state of stress and doesn't teach them to sleep. They need to feel safe through attachment, which happens through seeing, feeling, smelling, and hearing you in order to feel safe and sleep well. So supporting emotions. Each child has different emotional responses, so we have to figure out what works best and how we can best support their emotions, just like us as adults have different emotional responses. And their emotions definitely change as they get older. It's really important to let them have their emotions while still being there to support them. So if you have a child that's getting older, or then you can just be there to support them, or an infant just holding them close. So emotions might come when you start to set boundaries around sleep if you're wanting to make a change. So maybe you're just wanting to nurse, but you're no longer wanting to put them to sleep. So with the older child, you could say, mommy's going to nurse you and daddy will put you to sleep so that you can prepare them for what's going to happen. Or if you're thinking about an infant, just being there to support them as they get these emotions out to adjust to this change. So all children need support in different ways because their temperaments are different. Some of us are more emotional, some of us are more serious, and it's the same with our kids. So it's important to remember any time that you make a change, there will be emotions involved as the child feels unsafe at the moment because this isn't familiar. So it's important for you to let them know that it still is safe during this change. During changes, it can many times feel like we're taking one step forward and two steps back. And change can take time. And as we, especially allowing our children to express emotions to accept this new change. So, just like adults, we might feel upset or sad when something changes. Our little ones feel the same emotions. They just don't know how to truly express and regulate these emotions. So, sleep without formal sleep training is my big focus. I think it's just really important to know your child and your family and the needs and support in that way. So, by focusing on the topics that we've covered involving normal infant sleep, you can support your baby to sleep without formal sleep training or leaving them to cry alone. So, these things would be looking at sleep associations and routines, like we talked about, in their environment. What's the best environment for them to sleep in? Understanding what those common sleep interrupters are, like teething or sickness, or the progressions, and looking at self-soothing versus self-settling and really supporting their emotions along the entire journey. So in closing, I want to remind you that you're still important as well. Looking back, I realized I completely lost myself in motherhood and I didn't take care of me. So this left me feeling dissatisfied in myself, as I loved working out before my son was born and pretty much quit after I had him. And this left me feeling exhausted, not taking care of myself. So taking time to fill your cup so that you have enough to give to your children and other important people of your life is so important. So to be the best person that you could be, it's really important to just even if it's just a few minutes, to take care of yourself every day, to do things that you enjoy. And remember that the person that you were before you had your kid is still inside of you, even though they are amazing and it's life changing becoming a parent, you're still important as well. And I think by taking care of ourselves, it can teach our children that as they grow, they need to take care of themselves too.